Greetings. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second presentation for our Autumn 2020 Food System Seminar, Growing Resilience and Equity. As you recall from last week, I'm your seminar instructor, Yona Sipos, and I am very happy to be back here with all of you. I hope that you're taking care and starting to find the rhythm of this strange quarter. Before I introduce our esteemed speaker for today, I have several announcements to share. Starting with our land acknowledgement. As with last week, we acknowledge that the University of Washington and the City of Seattle are on traditional Coast Salish territory, including the lands and waterways of this area. And these nations and tribes include the Duwamish, the Muckleshoot, Tulalip, and other Coast Salish tribes and nations who are all still here. By the time you watch this lecture, it will already have been International Indigenous Peoples Day, which is on Monday, October 12th. This is a holiday that celebrates and honors Native American peoples and commemorates histories and cultures and the present. There is much to celebrate, much to learn. On the Food Tank website, which bills itself as a think tank for food, there is a new article that I've posted here featuring organizations across the globe who are promoting Indigenous food sovereignty. This is a topic that we'll have a chance to dig into a little bit with a later presentation when we get to feature the Makah Nation coming to talk about Indigenous fishing rights before and during COVID. So happy International Indigenous Peoples Day to all. I encourage you to check out both the resources that are posted here and to search for events that may be going on all of next week. Another important international day is also happening this week. This is World Food Day. World Food Day was launched in 1945 by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. There's a different theme each year. And so this year, I believe the theme is Grow, Nourish, Sustain Together. And there are, as with the previous slide, there are many resources and events that are happening, virtual, of course, that are happening, and I encourage you to check it out. There are even some local, as in Washington State, events that are happening organized by the FAO, by the North American chapter of the FAO. So I've posted that information here for you. And there will also be, I believe, at 11 o'clock, or maybe that's actually Eastern time, so Pacific time, starting at 8 a.m. on Friday, there will be lots of speakers and a whole event that is streamed through Food Tank that I just mentioned before. So I encourage you to check that out. And then finally, just to share, this morning, or rather, this was Friday morning when we're recording this presentation, there was just an announcement of the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize. This has been awarded to the World Food Program. And this nomination for the World Food Program to be a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize came before the coronavirus pandemic that we're experiencing. And it was meant to be really a stark reminder that hunger across the world is increasing. Last year, in 2019, 135 million people suffered from acute hunger, which is the highest number in many years. This number is projected to even increase. It is increasing, and it's projected to maybe even double due to COVID. So I encourage you to look into this, find out more. We'll have a chance today potentially to dig into some of these global international issues that we're facing and thinking about strategies that we can all learn about and participate in to address these issues of our time. Finally, moving back toward the seminar, we have our first assignment that's due this week. And so it is a reflection that is due for the Nutrition 400 students, for the undergrads in the class. It is due this Thursday, and really it's an opportunity after you've had a chance to review this presentation and then also make sure that you have gone through the readings that are posted under Module 2, have a chance to reflect on what did you learn and really what questions remain for you. And more details are available for you on Canvas, so I encourage you to check those out. This is not meant to be arduous, it's meant to give you an opportunity to kind of capture some of your learning and to give you some encouragement to reflect on what else you would still like to learn about the topics that are being presented. So please review Canvas instructions carefully, and if you do have questions, you can post them in the discussion section on Canvas, and Dorothy or I will do our best to respond to you. And with that, I am going to switch gears so that I get to introduce to you our first guest speaker for the seminar. And this is Dr. John Ingram, who's joining us today from the University of Oxford. He runs the Food Systems Program. He's the Food Systems Program leader, rather, of the Environmental Change Institute at Oxford. And his full bio is online, but Dr. Ingram is trained as a soil scientist with extensive experience in Africa, Asia, across Europe, specifically the UK, but also with international organizations such as the FAO, UNEP, and others. And in addition to leading the Food Systems Research Group within the Environmental Change Institute, he also leads IFSTAL, the Interdisciplinary Food Systems Teaching and Learning Program. And we'll get to hear more about that today. And so without ado, I will turn it over to Dr. John Ingram. And we are so thrilled that you're able to join us. So John, I'll stop sharing so that you're able to pull up your slides, and we all look forward to your talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much, Jonna, for that introduction, and hello everybody. Very nice to be with you, and thank you for this invitation to share some of the thoughts we've had in our research group over the years, and to give you a little bit of an introduction to this IFSTAL program that Jonna mentioned. So it's often helpful to just start with a question as we're thinking about food systems. The question is, what do we actually want from our food systems? It might seem a very obvious question. We want our food security. That's often broken down into these three major components: food access, food availability, and food utilization, all of which need to be stable over time. But just think for a moment, what else do we want from our food system? I'm sure you've all got many ideas, but some of the ideas that we've been working with are income, livelihoods, employment for all the people across the food sector, environmental outcomes, ecosystem services and the like. People are animal welfare, top of the list for some people, health outcomes, and so it goes on, and I'm sure you could all add to the list. So, thus said, that's what we want from the food system. Now, how does it all work? Well, basically, we've got what we call a set of activities in the food system, wide range of social and economic activities. The cartoon just shows some of these major ideas: producing food, processing, packaging, wholesaling and retailing, and of course consuming. Across the piece, there's transporting and trading, storage issues, there's disposal and waste cycling, and all the rest of it. So all this set of activities is going on all the time. And just as a reminder, you might notice that all of these words end in the letters ing, and that's just a little aide-memoire that these are doing words. They're things that we do. I'll come back to that in a moment. So the food system activities. Now, as we move material along this diagram from the field or from the barn or from the branch to our plates, we transform that material enormously. Put it simply, I don't want to eat wheat, I want to eat bread. And in that process of transformation, we change the character of that material to make it into something palatable. We can add quality, we can take away quality, we do all sorts of other things to it to transform it into the food we want. But we do something else. We add value to that basic material, and we provide the livelihood opportunities in this system for all those different people who are working across the piece. So food system activities, really important to a lot of people. All of these activities are governed by what we call environments: social environment, economic, political, science and technology, for instance, biophysical environments, which affect the way all these activities are done by the people who do them. So the other thing to think about is, what do we get? The activities are what we do, the doing words, but what do we get? What are the outcomes of those doing words? Well, food security, obviously, as we've just seen, but also these social and economic outcomes, coupled with, of course, feedbacks to the system, and then environmental outcomes with their own feedbacks to the food system activities like this. So it's a very simple little diagram. What we need to remember is that we want a lot of things from the food system, but there are trade-offs. Do we want better health at the expense of biodiversity? Do we want reduced climate change at the expense of affordability? What we're aiming for, of course, are the synergies that we can exploit to achieve what we want. So let me just start. What are the proximal drivers for food insecurity? Well, the diagram at the top shows a number of circles. Over on the left, we've got about 1 billion people, with insufficient calories, insufficient nutrients. Middle red circle, we've got perhaps 3 billion of us with sufficient calories but insufficient nutrients. The circle to the right, 2.5 billion of us with too many calories for our physiological need, many of whom don't have sufficient nutrients. And then in the green circle, we've got the remainder of the global population, perhaps less than half, with the good diet. So the question is, what actually determines what places any of us in any of these circles? It is effectively our constraints on our dietary choice and diversity. And these constraints are determined by these sorts of words that you see in italics, which are coming from very fundamental ideas of food security: preference, skills, convenience, affordability. Where do these constraints arise from? Well, the food chain actors, or the processes, the doing words that go between the farm and your plate, processing, packaging, trading, advertising, etc., they set the final calorific and nutrient quality and quantity and the price at the shop. That's actually what sets the price at the shop. Then one thinks of the land or the ocean, where the basic material comes from, and the farming and the horticulture, etc., set the basic calorific and nutrient quantity and price at the farm gate. Now, the farmer or the fisherman, they get their material from the natural resource base, which depends on the productivity and the diversity and quality of that natural resource base. This all seems very straightforward and linear. However, there are massive feedbacks, of course, and it's a system, so there are feed forwards and feedbacks. And both the feed forwards and the feedbacks are governed by this wide range of environments that we touched on earlier. But what's of particular interest, particularly today, is the nature of stresses and shocks, which affect all of these compartments in the diagram in various ways. So that's the basic picture. We've got a food system that delivers degrees of food security depending on a whole range of conditions to people on the planet. But we also know about the food system impacts on the global environment. We know that we've got about 33% of our soils are degraded, about 1/5 of our aquifers are overexploited, 60% of biodiversity loss is very much at the door of the food sector. And we know in our marine resources, we've got about 1/3 overfished and getting on for 2/3 fully fished. And we also have concerns about pollution in terms of chemicals, plastic, litter, you name it. And finally, about 1/4 of all the greenhouse gas emissions from human activities are coming from the food system. So there's a big environmental agenda as well as a nutrition and health agenda. The just over about a year and a half ago now, big piece out from the Lancet, a large paper which said the global syndemic of obesity, undernutrition and climate change is the big problem, the big challenge. I think that's quite clearly the case. But in addition to that, we've also got other concerns. Here we are today, all of us addressing this massive pandemic, very much to do with the interaction between animals and humans. We've got antimicrobial resistance, which is a very, very big and growing problem due to the overuse in many cases of prophylaxis in animal husbandry. We've got increased interaction generally between animals and humans because of population pressure, urban environments and the like. And the small words in the diagram, which I'm sorry if they're too small to read, but they're all major diseases that are due to the nature of the overlays captured in the graph. So there's a big issue here. What we've got to do is balance our interests. What do we want out of our food system? Yes, achieve food security. Populations are very largely getting wealthier, certainly urbanizing, growing in number. We need to minimize further environmental degradation. And of course, we need to get a handle on these blood-related diseases. However, it's against the background of stresses and shocks. And we've got natural resource depletion we've just been looking at. In many parts of the world, there are stagnating rural economies. Of course, we've got climate change and incidents of extreme weather and massive social, cultural and economic changes afoot. So it really is quite a tall order, and that's today. The question is what's coming down the track. The uncertainty of the future is a really big challenge, but some things are well known. We can do what's called a trend analysis. On this very simple graph, I'm going to show you a trend analysis. It's quite a busy graph, so I'll explain what's going on. It's overall to do with global calorie consumption. Now, along the what have we got? Along the x-axis, we've got billions of people on the planet, and on the y-axis, we've got kilocalories per person per day consumption. The green line is 2000, which is by and large recommended average calorific intake per person. And the black sloping line shows what was going on in the year 2000, where we have something like 6 billion people. We had something like a billion with insufficient calorie and a billion or more with too much. So the appropriate proportion in the middle was more than about half. It's just a cartoon, it's not to scale. Now, here we are today, 2020, 7.7 or so billion people on the planet. We've still got about 1 billion people with too little. But as we've seen earlier, we've got perhaps 2.5 billion of us with too much. If we extrapolate the trend linearly, we see an increase in 10 years from now. The projections are there will be perhaps 3.5 billion people over consuming, still have 1 billion with too little. And then finally, if we just extrapolate again to 2040, one sees, again, alas, 1 billion people with too little, but getting on for half the global population with too much. This is a really serious possibility, but it need not happen. If one was just to extrapolate the past trends, this is what we see. So obviously we don't want that to be the case. Why not? Well, the environmental consequences of meeting this increased demand with our current food system activities and patterns and consumption trends are really dire. The costs of the triple burden of malnutrition, that's too few calories, too few nutrients, and too many calories. Direct, indirect and lost work days is currently over 10% of global GDP. And the current global cost of getting on for 500 million diabetics is approaching $1 trillion a year. The forecast is that we may be seeing at least twice that number of diabetics in the next decade or so. So the actual cash costs to our society is enormous, but the environmental costs are equally concerning. In order to move forward, we need to continue to work on meeting the demand for those people who don't have enough. No two ways about it. It's a moral issue, it's an environmentally important issue, it's also very important economically because it's the wealth of the nation is being held back for many countries because of people with too little food. But a much greater challenge, in my view, is actually how do we manage demand for those of us who are over-consuming? So we need to meet demand for those who don't have enough, and we need to manage demand for those of us who have too much. Now, there's various ways to do that, and we can look at some of those in due course. But for now, obviously changing diet, but reducing food loss and waste, two very obvious areas to look at. So that's what a trend analysis would show. If we think about the actual risks, here's some data from the latest World Economic Forum Global Risks Report, showing data for 2019 and 2020. Two sets of columns, the left-hand pair at 2019 and the right-hand pair at 2020. On the left, we have the top 5 global risks in terms of the likelihood of them happening. You can see at the top in both cases, extreme weather, absolutely certain it's going to happen. Failure to address climate and climate agenda, very likely to happen. Natural disasters, the same level. But what's interesting is that we have moved from a couple of technological risks on the list in 2019 to replace those with biodiversity loss and human-made environmental disasters. So what this is saying is the likelihood of global risks are now all firmly in the environmental camp. Over on the right, we see the risks in terms of impacts. And it's very sobering to note that for many, many years, you can look back at these reports, weapons of mass destruction was always at the top of that list. But this year, they've actually swapped it around. So climate action failure is now the top of the list. And this change that we've seen, I think, is extremely worrying. And it's something that we need to address very, very rapidly. So given the nature of these potential shocks and stresses, which we'll look at in a moment, let's think about the word resilience. We need to enhance food system resilience. Now, colleagues in ETH Zurich, a very eminent institute in Switzerland, came up with this definition, capacity over time of a food system to provide sufficient food. The point is, it only relates to food security. And as we saw at the beginning of this talk, we actually want a lot of other things from our food system as well. So what we have to do is enhance our understanding in order to accommodate the different perspectives that are looking at this common problem, multiple societal goals. And one of the extra big challenges is that the debate is really huge, value-laden issues, different worldviews, different perceptions of what's important. The thing needs to do, it has to be based on the use of evidence in order to cut through a lot of uninformed and frankly crazy debate. So what do we mean by resilience? 4 questions. Very important to answer these 4 questions before we launch into a really detailed discussion. Resilience of what to what? Seems very straightforward. Resilience of our food system to environmental change, as an example. You've got to be clear what we're talking about. But we also need to say for whom. Who are we talking about? Is it society at large, or is it cattle ranchers, or is it fishermen, or is it supermarkets? For who? And then another question, which is very rarely thought about, is over what time period? Are we talking about enhancing resilience over the next growing season for a farmer, or over the next generation for a society? And without answering these 4 questions, it's very hard to know what we're actually talking about. Of what? Food system functioning. This are, friends, the activities, the doing words. Are we interested in enhancing the resilience of the activities, the functioning of the system, how it functions, that is? Or are we interested in the function of it, i.e. what we get, the outcomes? Now, I argue from a societal point of view, we're actually more interested in the outcomes. We want food security, we want good jobs, we want clean environment. Those are the things that we're really interested in. So, to what? Food system stresses and shocks. On the left, after you have a steam train, sitting in the middle of the railway track, you see a steam train coming towards you. It's getting bigger, it's getting more powerful, it's worrying. It's something you're feel you've got to deal with. However, it's not a surprise. You can see it coming along. However, on the right, we have what we call black swans, which are unimagined or rare or wholly unpredictable events that can have a big impact. And the list on the left are some examples of the steam trains: changing demography, natural resource degradation, climate change, urbanization. These are stresses. They're getting more and more powerful. They in themselves are not a surprise. On the right, we have a list of true black swans. We've no idea what they are. We can't even imagine what they might be. But what we can do is populate that row, that column, with some words like this. These themselves are shocks when they happen, but in themselves they're not unknown phenomena. Election and referenda results. Here in my country, we had an extraordinary shock with the outcome from what's called the Brexit referendum a few years ago. Major shock. Pandemics, here we are living in one, major shock. The concept of a referendum result or a pandemic is not alien, but we don't know when it's going to happen or what it's going to be. So, stress or shock. Then we ask the question, for whom? Well, here we've got our food system actors, the people doing the doing words, as we say, all along the chain. As is the focus could be for us to decide what the answer to the question is. And then we ask over what time period. And here we can differentiate short-term interruptions, which are normally due to a shock, like a disease outbreak, or just-in-time grocery delivery being perturbed by an IT malfunction, something like that. Differentiate those from what we call longer-term disruptions, which are usually due to stresses. For instance, natural resource degradation or change in dietary preferences. So the response to either a short-term interruption or a long-term disruption has to be varied, and it depends on what we're trying to achieve. So we need to think about how we can enhance resilience in relation to the food system outcomes. And there are a number of concepts we can think about. The first is what many people immediately think of when you say resilience. They think robustness. It's a big, strong system. It's not going to be affected by any stress or shock. It's just going to stay solid and continue delivering its existing food system outcomes. It's a robust system. The next example is recovery, where the system takes a knock, but it can come back again. It can bounce back. And here the aim is to return to the existing food system outcomes after the disruption, to the status quo, return to the status quo, because we like it. The third area is what we call reorientation, which is actually where we aim to accept alternative food system outcomes. before or after a disruption, what we call bounce forward or transformation. So we are accepting as society, if you will, that we will be satisfied with alternative outcomes to those that we currently have. We will be satisfied with a changed diet. We'll be satisfied with changed working relations. We'll be satisfied with a different type of transformation which would lead to different outcomes. So the reorientation can be very powerful. So whichever one's aiming for, robustness, recovery, or reorientation, we need to do something called reorganization, which means we have to make changes to the system activities, the doing words. Adaptation, that's what adaptation is all about. Adaptation is a fancy word for doing things differently. Now, we can either just go straight in and do them differently, or we can cause them to be done differently by changing the environments, changing the policies, changing the laws, changing the commercial opportunities, changing the science and technology options. You get the idea. But the point is, in order to bring about different outcomes, we need to do the activities differently. If we think about this arrangement at a system level, at the top of the diagram, we see our cartoon characters of the food system activities, the doing words, giving rise to the food security outcomes. These are all influenced by the environments we've been talking about, the social, political, business, etc. environments. Now, against the background of socioeconomic drivers, since society began, we've had changes in demography and social political context and cultural context and all the rest of it. So these things are completely understood. Over the last 100 years or so, the changes in the socioeconomic drivers have led to measurable changes in the environmental drivers. Climate change, obviously, change in water availability, soil degradation, change in biodiversity, coupled with some natural drivers, volcanoes, solar cycles and things, frankly, over which we have no control at all. But it's quite true that we can now measure the impact of humanity on the environment. Now, there's a huge amount of scientific literature about how climate change will affect food security, but actually it's a discussion on how climate change affects how crops grow. Now, crops growing is important, but in itself, it is not food security. Further, if one's really interested in how these drivers will affect the whole system, we need to recognize that they interact. And it's not just one of the words on the left affecting one of the words on the right. It's the combination of all the words on the left in the blue and the yellow bubbles affecting the system on the right. And when the system is affected or stressed with a shock or a change of a new opportunity, we intervene. We respond. We change the way we do our food system activities to take advantage of a new situation or to avoid a new situation. We can intervene in our policies, our business opportunities and the like. The fact of the matter is, the purpose for intervening is normally to generate a positive socioeconomic feedback, more profit, or better health, or even political stability. But whenever we intervene in the system, we always get an environmental feedback as well, and often unforeseen and often unrecorded. So unless you have a specific agenda for enhancing environment, generally the blue area in the diagram doesn't get much of a shout, and the yellow area of the diagram is what it's all about. The problem is going back into the notion of a system where you can see these feedbacks, if not considered from a synergy point of view, as opposed to a trade-off point of view, can lead to an amplification of the stress itself. This, in effect, is what's happening. And this is what would happen with that graph I showed ramping up over time, unless we do something a bit brighter. How are we going to do it? Well, coming round to the IFSTAL bit of the conversation, what I think we can agree is that the food sector really needs to be better equipped, better skills to tackle these challenges, not only of today, but what's coming down the track. And the argument goes that we really need to tool up the workforce with the concepts and the methods so that they're able, the individuals working across the food sector, whether it's in policy or private sector or civil society or whatever, have the ability and the capability to implement interventions in a clever way to give us better food security, better environment, better enterprise, fair and just systems, all the things we want. This needs to be based on an understanding of the range of food system activities, the range of the outcomes, and the complexity of the system. But further, knowledge is great, but we really need the people of the future working in the food sector to have both the hard skills of the knowledge and the soft skills of the capability to bring about system change. Soft skills, things like communication skills, empathy, understanding other people's viewpoints, all those sorts of things that we'll look at in a moment. So this acceptance that we need a new workforce, better equipped, people like yourselves, able to go out into the workplace, armed with the knowledge and the capability to bring about systemic change, led us to come up with this program that we called Interdisciplinary Food Systems Teaching and Learning. And I'm at Oxford University, you've doubtless heard of that. It's a very big university with a huge number of departments, but by no means everything necessary to think about food systems. For instance, we do not have a school of agriculture. That might surprise you. We have no veterinary science. We don't have anything on food science, food chemistry, food physics, anything like that. We don't have anything on packaging and the like. So by reaching out to partner institutions where other skill sets exist, we can actually bring together a wide range of skills to offer to a student cohort so that they can think about the whole system and have input from faculty members in other universities where they're not necessarily registered to provide a rounder picture. So the vision of IFSTAL, we're looking at a cohort of professionals. We almost coined the phrase food system analyst as a new profession. And one can go out and you meet somebody at a cocktail party. Oh, what do you do? I'm a banker or whatever. And what do you do? Oh, I'm a food system analyst. So people say, oh, that's kind of neat. They come from a wide range of graduate backgrounds. In the UK program, we've had graduates from over 100 different master's programs. 100 different master's programs. It's absolutely phenomenal. They will be employed in a wide range of work environments. They can be in a local food co-op, or they could be working for a major international company like Nestle, or they could be working for USDA, whatever it is. And further, they are able to apply critical interdisciplinary systems thinking. This is really what's necessary. And the purpose for that is to help us move to transform the food system, to move the food system towards more equitable, sustainable, resilient, healthy outcomes. That's really what the IFSTAL vision is. So, in summary, it's a collaborative multi-university program that gives context to specialist studies. It provides the students with the enhanced skills necessary to address the challenges, and it is fundamentally an interactive learning opportunity supported by an online resource. It is not a MOOC. The learning is done in person by meeting students from other universities with other skills to offer. Our model is voluntary. It doesn't impinge on student contact time. It's not assessed. There's no exams. There's no mark given. It just sits alongside and supports their learning and their research. And we do offer a certificate of participation, which just says that this person attended the IFSTAL program. It doesn't make any comment on how well they did or how much they attended, but on that certificate, there's a little place for the student to write in their own words what they gained. And the more they gain, the stronger that personal statement. And that document, together with a learning journey document, really powerful piece of paper to have at a job interview. So, soft skills training, rich pictures, strange words, backwove, they're techniques that can be used to help understand multi-stakeholder partnerships. These are all things that we do and we help the students with. And then skills, I've mentioned some, communication, but also the ability to recognize and work within complexity, to accept there is theoretical pluralism, to understand how to facilitate a conversation. So this combination of tools and skills, together with knowledge about how the food system works, leads us to what we call the student skills framework, where you see a range of issues broadly divided into these three areas: skills, knowledge and understanding, and values and attitudes. And the argument goes that through the face-to-face workshops, away days and the summer school and these sorts of things, and the blended learning approach, we build this whole package within the student individuals, but also within the student cohort. And so you go out from your studies into the world of work, you have gone through the IFSTAL year with people you've got to know from other universities, from other disciplines, and you can stay together in your world of work as a network, and you can continue to support each other in delivering your work. So we do have a number of formal activities over the academic year. We have 4 units, as they're called, 4 titles: Introduction to Systems, Introduction to System Thinking, Methods for Analyzing Food Systems, and then How do you bring about change, all very important topics. We have this virtual learning environment, which supports the face-to-face activities, and it's what we call a flipped classroom. So the students study some material online, and then they come together in a workshop. We have a number of workplace interactions. So colleagues who are in the world of work come into the away days, come into the seminars, and give their own view of what it's like in the world of work, the sort of work they do, their career path to get there, what are the job opportunities. And these interactions with the workplace are deemed to be very, very valuable by the students. And many of them end up working in the companies where the people who came to meet them are based. So what's in it for you, the students? Well, it's an interdisciplinary learning package, cutting-edge food system thinking. It's a network for faculty and fellows across the institutions, and it gives contact to a wide range of experts from the workplace. This model is proving incredibly useful. Increased job prospects. Now, while the information in IFSTAL is not assessed, working with the IFSTAL package over the year actually gives the students in their degree course a much better position to write a good essay. And many of the students who are undertaking the IFSTAL package actually get better marks because they can write a really good opening chapter or a really good opening paragraph to set the context of their discipline. But in addition to that, there are opportunities for dissertations, postgraduate internships, and all this sort of stuff, and membership of this graduate network. So just a little bit of progress for your information. Over we're just starting year 6 now, but over the years we've had in excess of 1,500 students engaged across the partner institutions. They've come from 45 different departments, as I say, over 100 different programs, which is extraordinary. We've had over 100 different workplace partners come into the program to meet the students, to work with the students, to encourage them and to enthuse them. And we've had about 150 students attend intensive summer schools now. I think the most important bit is that we've got this very powerful alumnus being developed of people who've been through the IFSTAL program and are now out in the world of work. And we are aware of in excess of 350 of our alumni who are known to be applying the new skills and knowledge and capability in food systems related work. And in addition to the work in the UK, we've also been working overseas in Africa, Indonesia and Pacific and the like. And it's really encouraging to see the interest that people around the world are taking in food systems. You're all aware that it's more than a buzz phrase now. It's very much central to much planning at international and national level. And through a better understanding of food systems and a better way of seeing how you can apply your specific knowledge in your course as nutritionists or whatever you're going to be doing in the food sector, but knowing where your skill fits in the big picture and how you can interact more effectively with other skills is really, really valuable. So I encourage you to think about food systems in your work. I encourage you to stay engaged with the discourse on food systems as it emerges. We've actually got the UN Summit next year, the Food Systems Summit convened by the United Nations itself. And food systems and food systems thinking is going to be a really, really important thing for the future. So let me close there, Jonna, and say thanks very much for the opportunity to talk with your students. Be very happy to answer any questions by email or whatever. But for now, let me hand you back to Jonna. Thanks so much.
John, if we were in person, there would be a whole room clapping for you. Thank you so much for a talk that was both sobering and inspiring. You know, so I'd like to just kind of land on that second piece, the inspiring. And I think you were, you were starting to share with us some of the outcomes of the IFSTAL program and of, helping to support and to engage this current food system leaders and the next generation of food system leaders. And I wonder if you could just speak a little bit more about where you see hope for the future of food systems and also, in the face of all of the challenges that you outlined, the environmental challenges, the social, the health, food security challenges, where do you see hope and how does that intersect with IFSTAL?
Well, first of all, enhanced awareness. I'm really encouraged by the youngest generation now, the younger generation, huge environmental awareness, a lot more interest in personal health, and that in itself is enough to inspire me. How can I help at my end of the game with the people who are now emerging to take the place of the future leaders in the food system, whether they're in academia like me or whether they're out in the public sector or private sector? So I think the hope is that people are aware that there are programs like IFSTAL. I'm not saying it's perfect, but there are programs like IFSTAL which help people understand how things fit together, and it helps them communicate, because there are enormous opportunities ahead. There are tremendous opportunities for better policies, more joined up policy. Goodness, we always say it all the time. There are opportunities to do it. And one of the challenges that I see in governments around the world is that they're not thinking systemically. They're thinking about whatever it is the title is on the door that they're building. And that's all very well because it's important, but it's really got to be seen in much more of a joined up way. That's what food system thinking does in the food sector. It shows where agriculture needs to interface with processing, which needs to interface with marketing and retail, which needs to interface with waste management. And all of these things can be seen systemically. And wherever somebody works in that complex system, if they are better aware that A, it is a system, B, where they fit in it, and C, how they can interact better with others to jointly deliver better outcomes, we have nothing but good hope.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a lot to think about there. And I think it'll be extremely relevant for the students in the seminar because they come from every possible program here at the University of Washington. So as you know, we have over 200 students registered for the seminar, and they are in public health, they're in College of the Environment, they're in arts and sciences, medicine, fine arts, and they're all taking a food system seminar. So perhaps this is the first step for some of them, and for some of them, they're in the food systems program.
Well, I encourage you all, if you're still listening, to take good heed to Jonna and stay with it. Just think about your speciality in the context of the system. Don't give up on your speciality. We need specialists. But if those specialists have a broader vision of where their bit fits, they will have a more fulfilling career, in my opinion.
I think that's extremely insightful and extremely important for students in the variety of disciplines that they're studying to hear that and to start to consider whether or not they see a clear path, but start to consider what is the path to their contribution to a system's problem, the system's problems, the one that you've described.
Sure.
So one last question for you, if I think we still have just a couple minutes. When I introduced the seminar last week, I showed an image that showed this relationship between sustainability and resilience as one dependent on the other. And then you and I had a short email exchange suggesting, well, there's a little bit more, there are different ways to think about that. And so you started to touch on that. And I know that IFSTAL has, as you mentioned, the resilient, equitable, sustainable, and healthy food system, I think, are the kind of goals of the food system through IFSTAL. Could you speak a little bit more about the relationship or the interactions, but also the differences between resilience and sustainability in particular?
Sure, it's a really important point. For the last 30, 40 years, people have been saying we need to have a more sustainable system. That's true. Generally, they're meaning environmentally sustainable, but of course, from a food system point of view, it has to be socially sustainable and it has to be economically sustainable. 3 pillars of sustainability. That's all good stuff. Now we've got much more sensitized to these shocks and stresses, we're also using the resilience word. And as you were just describing in the little cartoon you described, we've got a sort of 2 sides of a coin. They are different things. Resilience is not the same as sustainable. Now, there are elements of overlap, and I'll explain why. Do you remember we had the 3 notions of resilience? We had robustness, we had recovery, and we had reorientation. Now, you can build a very robust system which is not sustainable at all. It might need ever-increasing layers of concrete. It might need ever-increasing provision of grain for cows, whatever it is. You think this is fantastic, it's really robust, but it's terribly unsustainable. You can have a system that's designed to recover rapidly, but that could also be very unsustainable. Imagine you're getting flooded every year, so your recovery system is to buy a bigger and bigger pump every year to pump out the water. You're thinking you're doing really well here. We've got a super strong recovery system, but because you can't go on buying a bigger pump forever. So the third notion, which is what we call the reorientation, particularly if it applies, for instance, to diet. I'm not advocating anything, let me be clear. I'm just putting forward a scenario where one reduces red meat consumption, not cut it out, just reduce red meat consumption. That has a number of benefits that are known. Lower environmental footprint, reduced health impact. There are problems, however, all the livelihoods of the people who work in that industry. So as ever, there's a trade-off. But if we get it right and we juggle it correctly, we can actually enhance the resilience of our food system by not relying so heavily on one particular food type, but by spreading it across more. So that as a bit of shock or stress arrives, it might take out a bit of the system, but because we've diversified more, we have that greater resilience, while at the same time reducing arguably the environmental and health costs of the physiologically unnecessary overconsumption of red meat, as an example. So for the reorientation option for resilience, we do see an overlap with sustainability in certain circumstances. But whatever it is, it's going to need reorganization. And that's why we call it reorientation, because we need to reorient our views of what we want as food system outcomes.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a very a clear answer and a lot to think about as we go forward through the quarter. And we'll also be delving more into issues of equity, which of course was mentioned numerous times in your presentation. But thinking about that intersection, I really appreciated your questions to guide our thinking around resilience, not just of what, but all, you know, continuing on, but also for whom, right?
And over what time period?
And over what time period, exactly.
Okay. Really important. You've got to ground out those 4 questions before you and I understand what we're both talking about.
That's right. So I really appreciate that you set the stage, and both set the stage and gave us a pathway to go forward. And I think that several of our students, no doubt, I will not be surprised if they're looking up IFSTAL right now and thinking about how they might pursue IFSTAL through their graduate studies.
Sure.
And I'm very excited to say that the University of Washington is excited about learning more about the potential for a relationship with IFSTAL and thinking about how we might grow this relationship.
Sure. Well, we're here to help University of Washington build its own IFSTAL community, if that's what you want to do.
Thank you so much, John. We're going to wrap up now, and I'll just ask you to hang on for just a moment. Thank you again, and this was a wonderful talk. Much appreciated.
Thanks for the opportunity. Good luck, everybody. Keep at it.